going to talk about the 10 things that we've noticed in our work at Chemistry Staffing that have changed, and things that you need to know about, whether you're hiring staff or whether you're looking for a new ministry role. First of all, who am I and why am I talking to you about this? My name's Todd, and I've got about 30 years of experience in the church, helping pastors and church staff both navigate transitions, and my priority has really been on establishing healthy church teams. So that's where my passion is, where my heart is. I'm also the original founder over at churchstaffing.com. I'm the co-founder at chemistrystaffing.com, which is where I work now. And I also host, I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end too, also host a daily podcast. It's called the Healthy Church Staff Podcast. I'll give you some more information on that later. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with, we're going to talk about 10 trends, and then we got a bonus trend for you at the end as well. These are 10 trends that we're seeing in our work at Chemistry Staffing, working with hundreds of churches over the past 8 years and literally thousands of candidates. But a lot has changed in the last 5 years in particular, but even more so in the past year. So I wanted to share some of these things. If you're a candidate and you're looking for a new church, or if you are hiring for your church, maybe you don't do a lot of hiring. Things are much different today, hiring, than what they were even 2 or 3 years ago. So we're going to go through those. So trend number one that we're seeing is that there are more openings and fewer qualified candidates. Okay. More openings and fewer qualified candidates. So what that means is that we're still experiencing some of the effects of COVID. And believe me, if I never had to say the word COVID again, I never would. I'm so tired of talking about COVID. But COVID has had in the church, has had some really long tail effects. And we're still feeling some of that. One of the effects is that many people have just left ministry altogether. Some just needed a break. Some are slowly coming back, but it's just a lot different because so many people have left. The church landscape is really witnessing a surge in demand for qualified leaders because of this. And that's going to make your recruiting process, if you're hiring, that's going to make your recruiting process a lot different because honestly, it's supply and demand. If we could put it in other words, there right now, it might not be this way in 6 months, but right now there are more church staff openings than what there are qualified candidates. Okay. So what that means for you is, and we have both people that are hiring and people that are looking for jobs. What that means for you, if you're a job seeker or hiring, is that this is a candidate's market just because of the supply and demand. And what it means for you if you're hiring is that hiring is harder. It's harder than what it was a year ago. It's harder than what it was 2 years ago. It's definitely harder than what it was pre-COVID. It often takes more time, and potentially it takes changing a little bit of your expectations moving forward. Okay. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Here's a case in point. And this is one of the things that we're seeing that's really just kind of happened in the last, I want to say 6 to 8 months, definitely within the past year. So normally when churches look, let's talk about specifically worship pastors, because this is where we're seeing it mostly. Okay. Typically when you're looking to hire a worship pastor, you're looking for somebody that's musically talented, right? You're somebody that's pastorally equipped, right? They can pastor a team. Somebody that can do administration effectively, somebody that can recruit volunteers, somebody has some incredible leadership chops. You're really kind of looking for what we call it chemistry, we call it Jesus with a guitar. Okay. You're looking for the whole package, right? And when it comes to looking for somebody that has that whole package, there aren't nearly as many of them out there. So what we're seeing, and we'll talk about this in a second, what we're seeing a lot of churches do is that they can't have the whole package because there aren't a whole lot of the whole packages out there. So they're starting to say, okay, what would this look like if we maybe split this position into, sure, we have somebody that's musically trained and can pastorally lead a team and recruit some people, but what if we took the administration out of it and had more of the administration taken care of? So it's just a different way of looking at what has been, we're just going to hire a worship pastor that does everything. Because of the tight market, it's a little bit harder to find those people. So you might have to just adjust a little bit. So that's trend number one, is it's a candidate's market right now. Okay. Trend number 2 is, and this isn't true for everybody, but it's true, we're seeing it more and more. Less attendance and less giving means less staffing budgets or decreased staffing budgets. So economic constraints, again, not everywhere, but a lot of places, and these changing workforce preferences that we just talked about have led many churches to favor part-time or even bivocational positions over traditional full-time roles. So it could just be 5 years ago, if you wanted to hire a youth pastor, you could hire a youth pastor for maybe $35,000 or $40,000. That is not the case anymore. It's because of everything that's happened, because of the market, because of inflation. It's just been a perfect storm. So the days of hiring a $35,000 or $40,000 youth pastor are over. But church giving has either remained steady, maybe gone up slightly, but a lot of cases that's gone down. When your youth pastor leaves or when you're looking at hiring, it's much more difficult financially speaking, and the replacement costs of hiring new staff have gone up so much that a lot of churches are starting to look at different ways of doing things, and that could be bivocational, and that could be part-time roles. Approximately 15,000 churches are projected to transition from full-time to part-time pastoral leadership. This is according to Tom Rayner in a study that he did recently. And what he says is that's just really reflecting some of the financial pressures and changing ministry models. And we are starting to see that more and more with some of the churches that we work with. So really what this means is that a lot of churches are having to adapt by redefining their roles and their expectations, and maybe considering part-time staff for roles that they would have considered for full-time staff earlier. So that's trend number 2. Trend number 3, more candidates are preferring to stay local. And again, we started seeing this shift about 5 years ago coming out of COVID. Here's what happened, I think. During COVID, we had a lot of church staff people that worked away from where they grew up or away from family, maybe 5 states away, 1,000 miles away, and COVID hit and everything shut down. And for the first time ever, people were not able to travel freely. And that was travel restrictions happened for a good 7, 8 months until things really started to open up again. What I think happened is that we had a lot of church staff that felt really they were away from home and they felt really isolated. And they thought, if I ever make a move, I want to move back closer to family. I want to move back closer to where I feel comfortable. And we find that many candidates also now just prefer to stay in their local communities because they value their relationships that they've built. They value their community ties. What used to be a national search for us when we would start, and we still do national searches, but what used to be churches, you go and you're posting on church staffing, and you think you're going to get candidates from all over the country, and you will get some from all over the country, but a large amount of candidates that we've seen, there's been a real swing toward, I want to stay closer to home, closer to family, and if I'm moving back, I'm probably going to have some ties a lot of times with where that church is and where I'm from. Here's this is maybe an over exaggeration, okay? But 5 years ago, we heard a lot from people when we would interview them, and they would just say something like, I want to go wherever God wants me to be. I've got my preferences, but I'll go wherever God wants me to be. And today, a lot of times we'll hear, and I'm exaggerating here, I want to be within 15 minutes of Orlando. Actually, I had a candidate tell me that once. He said, I don't care where I go as long as I'm 15 minutes from Orlando. Truth is that a lot of candidates want to be back close to family, which means either your next hire is probably going to be someone that is either currently in your area or somebody that's somewhere else that would like to move back to your area because they have some kind of ties. Okay. What we say here is this trend emphasizes the importance of churches investing in local talent and fostering strong community relations to attract nearby candidates. The long play here is, and this might sound weird for somebody that owns a staffing company to tell you, but a lot of times your best candidates long-term are those that you have put into your own leadership pipeline and those that you've raised up internally. And then you don't even need to use a staffing company or look outside. So develop your bench now. It's never too early to start doing that. So start your search locally. That's what this means. There's a good chance that your candidate may already be in your backyard, or at least in your region. It doesn't mean that you can't hire somebody from a few states away, but there are some definite even advantages to having somebody in your local area. Okay, so that's trend number 3. I need to keep moving here. Trend number 4, no more one church at a time. The old way was interviewing with one church at a time. And this was, maybe I'm a little bit older, maybe this was my generation, but back in the day, 20, 25 years ago, whenever I made 2 transitions, worked at 3 different churches, whenever I made a transition, it was always speaking to kind of one church at a time. I spoke with one church at a time. They courted me, I courted them. It was like a dating relationship. You were mutually exclusive in that search process. And you continued down the road with that one church until you got a closed door. And only with the closed door did you start looking at another church or start talking to another church. That's totally changed now. The new way is that most of the people that we're talking to that are job searching, most of them, especially the younger ones, they're interviewing with many churches at the same time. Matter of fact, we had a candidate not too long ago that had 2 offers on the table, and we were trying to offer them to move forward with one of our churches as well. So it's very, and all that goes back to point number 1. It's very competitive right now. But just know that when you're talking to a candidate, they're probably talking to somebody else as well. And like I said, qualified candidates often receive multiple offers simultaneously. So they're trying to juggle a lot of different things here. Here are some practical implications of this, though. And this is something, if you've not hired for 5 or 10 years, some churches only have to hire when the pastor leaves or whatever. One of the things that's changed is it used to be that you could take 3, 4, 5 months and court this candidate and get to know them and just take your time. You can't do that anymore. You can't take 3 months to date anymore. Candidates have options. Candidates have other churches they're talking to. They maybe already have other offers on the table. That doesn't mean you need to rush, but it does mean that really good candidates are off the market quickly, and you really need to make sure that your hiring process is streamlined. So when you find somebody, when you get somebody on the hook, that you're ready to move, not rush, but move them through the process really expediently as you can. Okay, so that's trend number 4. Trend number 5, we're almost done. No, we're not. We're almost halfway done. Okay, candidates are picky and culture is key. This all goes back to point number 1, candidates market, because candidates have options, because a lot of candidates have different offers even on the table, and they're talking to a lot of different churches. They are increasingly picky, and you are not just in competition with other churches, you're in competition with a lot of different things. And this is something that's changed too. What I tell churches is, look, when you're talking to a candidate, the question used to be, do you want to work at my church? The question is not anymore, do I want to work at your church? It's, do I want to work at a church? Particularly the younger candidates. I may be overgeneralizing, but I've seen this more in younger candidates. When they talk about calling, somebody in my age group, when I talked about calling, it was like very specific. I was called to be a worship pastor at this church, right? Calling now is, I'm called to serve God, and I could do that in a church. I could do that as a worship pastor. I could do that as a discipleship pastor. I could do that at a local nonprofit organization that has the same values and the same causes. So younger candidates aren't necessarily looking to work necessarily specifically at a church. They want to serve God. They're hot on fire for Jesus, but it could be working at your church, or it could be working at the nonprofit down the street. What that means is you really have to refocus what you're looking at. And most churches, what I found, most churches don't get this. And here's why. Every church thinks that they're the bomb. Everybody would love to work at my church, right? I love my church, but it's not that easy. People are choosing to go where they align and where they feel the most valued. So you want to make sure. It used to be that when you were hiring staff, the staff had to sell you on them, but now you have to sell the church on you. You need to be crystal clear on who you are as a church, what your values are, what your purpose is, and because the candidates, they have more choices, and they're looking for somebody not just based on financial or location, they're looking for some place that they can fit. someplace where they're going to be a cultural fit. Okay. You have to sell yourself. You have to sell your church. You have to sell your community. You have to sell your staff. You have to sell your schools, the cost of living. The church, the days of your church selling itself are over because there are a lot of options. Okay. You have to convince potential staff members that they will absolutely thrive in your culture. That's trend number 5. Trend number 6. Trend number 6 is the rise of bivocational and co-vocational roles. This kind of goes back to, I forget what it was, trend 2 or 3, where we talked about decreased giving, decreased attendance, looking at different roles in different ways. And a lot of churches are doing this out of financial need, but a lot of them are just doing it because it just seems to be the right thing to do right now. And many church leaders are starting to embrace bivocational roles. It used to be that if you were bivocational, it was viewed as, why aren't you full time? A lot of church leaders are, and we'll talk about worship here in a second, a lot of church leaders are really embracing some of these bivocational roles because it allows them to balance ministry with something else that they like to do and support themselves financially. But we're just finding that many full-time staff are considering these options as well. And let me talk about worship. I mentioned worship earlier. Here's what we're seeing just in the last 6 to 8 months with worship people in particular, and how churches are having to rethink this, right? We talked before about hiring Jesus with the guitar, the candidate that can do this and they wear skinny jeans and all that. That's a whole other topic. But when you look at what is going through worship pastors' minds, we're finding fewer and fewer, and this has just happened in the past year, we're finding fewer guys and gals that want to do worship as a full-time role in a church. And I don't know why that's happening. Haven't quite figured that out yet, but we're starting to see that. Here's part of it, though. Part of it is, we've heard the story quite often. I can gig out 2 or 3 times a month. This is a musician speaking, an artsy person speaking, okay? And I'm an old worship guy myself. I can gig out 2 or 3 times a month, and I can make a good second income while I do something else. I can get more time with my family. And really, again, going back to COVID really opened up a lot of different options for people, and it really brought up this whole work-life balance thing. We're seeing a lot of worship people, and you add that in with, hey, I love my house, I love my kids' school, I love my community. I just want to stay here and maybe find a church in the local area where I can go and lead 2 or 3 times a month. So that's one of the trends that we're seeing, and this would be some of the rise of the bivocational. What does this mean for your church? Churches should consider structuring roles that accommodate bivocational staff, including providing some flexibility and support to dual responsibilities. Okay. So again, maybe you've always had a full-time youth pastor. Maybe in the future, you need to consider, when your youth pastor leaves or you're making a hire, maybe think of something unconventional, that you might have somebody that's a volunteer that's just absolutely hitting it out of the park. They don't want to do it full time, but they could step in and do a great time part time. Just some things that churches are actually starting to consider. And it's following on the church side of necessity because of budgets a lot of times, but on the candidate side, it's about finding people that really want to invest full time into a ministry role. It's just one of the things that's been changing. Okay. Trend number 7, an increased focus on succession planning. We're seeing this particularly with senior pastors, right? Boomers are aging. We're seeing a huge uptick in the past 12 months, especially, of pastors and churches reaching out to us at Chemistry and saying, hey, can you help us with our succession planning, or our succession planning, as I have there. I'll have to make a note, Kelly, make a note for me to change that typo in the slides. But we're getting tons of responses from churches that are saying, can you help us? Okay. And honestly, this is important stuff. And many churches think that they can deal with succession, with the transition of a senior leader. But believe me, it's messy. And outside help is almost always worth the money here, because you just don't know what you don't know. There's so much that goes into succession planning and making sure that you honor the current pastor and find the right person to come in or transition that right person in. There's just a lot to figure out there. We're seeing a lot of lot of interest in this, as particularly as boomers are aging out and saying, yeah, it's probably time for me to retire. Okay. Our advice on this process should start early. We often get the call way too late. Developing internal mentorship programs can help identify and prepare future leaders from within the congregation. Again, that's the long play. And if you've not been already doing that, it's going to be really hard to do that really quickly. I would say we get called usually within the last 6 months to a year. A church will call us and say, hey, our pastor's transitioning, or a pastor will call us and say, hey, I'm thinking of retiring. It's going to be September. That really, we can work with that, but the sooner the better. We would really love to start working with a church. Usually 2 years out, 2 to 3 years out is really optimal, just to get all of your ducks in a row and to really work through all the things and come up with a written succession plan that you'll need. Start early. And here's the hint: it's never too early. Okay. How are we doing on time? I need to get moving here. 8, 9, and 10, and then a quick bonus one. Okay. Number, a renewed emphasis on employee well-being. We don't want a replay of 2020. Let me tell you, 2020 kicked the snot out of a bunch of staff people. And if you were on staff at a church and you remember how incredibly exhausting going through everything that we went through in 2020 with the pandemic was, we don't want a replay of 2020. And unfortunately, some of 2020 is still with us. There are still church staff are facing high levels of stress leading to burnout. We're still seeing it. So what we're seeing a lot of churches do, sometimes out of necessity, but really out of just smartness of, we just went through a really tough season. What can we do not to go through another tough season like that? Is renewed emphasis on this employee well-being. The best way to keep your staff healthy is to get a healthy staff, and they will stick around. The quickest way to have a lot of turnover is just to burn people out. So implementing programs that promote physical and emotional and spiritual health can enhance both staff satisfaction and productivity. So what this means is you are wise to focus on the well-being of your staff. And if you're not being intentional on this, it will come back to bite you. If you're not intentional, you'll continue to have turnover, decreased engagement. So it's really important to focus on the well-being of your current team. And if you don't do that, you're going to find that you're going to have a whole new team in a year to 2 years, because if people aren't healthy, they won't stick around. Okay. Trend number 9, a demand for continuous learning and development. And this is something that we're seeing, especially for younger generations. If you're a younger person and you're looking for a new church job, I'd almost guarantee that this is something that's on your list. If you're hiring and you want to hire somebody younger and newer, this is something I really think you need to pay attention to, especially with younger generations. We want to be mentored and we want to advance within the organization. And this is something that's different from my generation. My generation, I was a worship pastor, and I was a worship pastor at 3 different churches over 15 years. Okay. But I never anticipated that I would move from a worship pastor to another role. I would just always figured it, hey, I'm a worship guy. If I want to do something else, I'm going to have to do it at a different church. Younger people are thinking about this totally different. They're young. A lot of them are young. They're hungry. They want to be mentored. They want to learn, but they also would rather stay where they are rather than pick up and move someplace else. But what that means is that they are looking for opportunities within your church. And I realize some churches are smaller and you have less opportunities, but they're looking for opportunities that they can stay where they are and grow as both a pastor and be mentored and move to the next level. So if you're thinking about, hey, we've got a youth pastor, we've got a worship pastor, we've got a senior pastor, when they're done youth pastoring, they can go somewhere else. That's not the way that people are thinking about it now, particularly younger people. If you can figure out ways within your church, within your organization, to grow those younger students, and it might not be a different position, it might just be mentoring and leadership opportunities. That's really important. Providing opportunities for professional development is really essential to kind of keep staff engaged and equipped to meet the current changes. So what this means for you, bottom line, is that younger staff members are going to move on if they're not engaged or they're not mentored or they're not given new opportunities. Young people want to be challenged. And matter of fact, a lot of young people are going to get really bored if they're not challenged or get disillusioned and want to move somewhere else. Okay. And then finally, number 10, a pronounced shift from specialists to generalists. Okay. This is something that we've seen since COVID as well. I realize a lot of the stuff goes back 5 years, but this is really some of the trends we've been seeing. We're talking versatility and roles. Okay. Churches are increasingly valuing staff who can handle multiple responsibilities and multiple buckets, one paycheck. Okay. So I left this for number 10 because this is the confluence of, I don't know, 3 or 4, right? You've got decreasing budgets. You've got all these things that are coming together here. One thing that I think COVID brought out was that we needed to have flexibility in our staff so that if something like what happened in 2020 happens again, we need a staff that can be versatile and can shift gears pretty quickly. But what we're seeing is moving from specialists to generals. The trend has been the last, I would say 10 years, is that everything has become very specialized. All right. I remember seeing a job posting for a female youth pastor for 5th and 6th grade girls. Okay. That's very specialized, right? That's like really specialized. 25 years ago, you know what the most popular besides senior pastor and kind of that youth worship combo was? What the most popular position hired was? I'm listening. It was associate pastor. Associate pastors did a little bit of jack of all trades, but they did everything. And that's one of the trends that we've seen in the past 5 years is that more and more churches are hiring just an associate pastor. You're going to do a little bit of discipleship and small groups ministry. You're going to do maybe a little bit of executive pastor role. You're going to do a little bit of pastoral care. But those kind of generalists are really valuable right now. And it's a rise of the associate pastor of this and that, a couple of different buckets. Okay. The benefits are generalists can adapt to various needs and fill gaps as they arise. So what this means for you, if you're hiring, is when hiring, you got to consider candidates with really diverse skill sets. So hire people that fit the trend that we just talked about, that will grow and actually enjoy doing different things or working with different departments or different roles inside the church. Okay. And then one bonus trend. And this is something that I'm not seeing yet. Okay. This is maybe a Todd fantasy bonus trend. Okay. Because we're not seeing it quite as much as I'd like to yet, but it's the whole rethinking automatic replacement hires. Okay. It's not happening yet, but I really think it needs to. Every staff departure, whenever you have someone on your team that leaves, someone on your team that resigns or moves on or whatever, that should really prompt a thorough evaluation of what your church's needs are, what their budget is, what their strategic direction is into the future. Every staff departure should start the process of asking a whole bunch of questions. That's not usually what happens. Usually, if you get a worship pastor resignation, the first thing you do is you go and you pull from the file, you blow the dust off of it, of the job description. You run over to churchstaffing.com and you post the job description because you need to hire another replacement. You need to hire another worship pastor. And all I'm telling you is, yeah, you may need to hire another worship pastor that looks exactly like and has the same job description as what you had. But given some of these trends, maybe you don't need a full-time. Maybe you need a part-time. Maybe you need to hire somebody that can do worship and something else. Maybe you need to change direction of the worship ministry. These are all questions that you should ask before just automatically saying, okay, our worship pastor resigned. We just need to hire another full-time worship pastor. So that's one of the trends that I think should happen. I hope that it happens, and we'll see. We'll do another webinar in 2026 and let you know how that goes. Okay. So here's what it means. Your bottom line for this bonus trend: don't hire reactively. Do you really need that position? What other holes are there to fill? How much budget do you have? Start there. How you doing? Quick commercial for chemistry staffing. If you need any help, we do staff hiring. We do a final fit analysis, which is really cool. If you're doing the search on your own and you find 1 or 2 people that you're like, we really like this person, this guy, this gal, but we need a kind of a pair of outside ears, eyes and ears, to come and just let us know what are we missing here? Is this really a good candidate for us or not? That's what we call a final fit analysis. We love to do those for churches that are doing searches on their own. So you can reach out to me for that. We do succession planning. I talked about that. Compensation analysis. We do some transitional coaching. If you got a team member that's leaving or needs to leave your team, we do some exit interviews. We do a staff health assessment that we're going to be doing again this fall. So we have all different kinds of opportunities that we can come alongside and assist you if we can. And you can always reach out to me at chemistrystaffing.com/connect. Let's go ahead and take some questions, and I will look at these. And this is always a fun time because you never know what question I'm going to get, and you never know what my answer is going to be. So this could be really interesting. So I am reading these questions as you are hearing me read these questions. Okay. First question, Doug asks, what kinds of things does your firm do with a church over the 2 to 3 years of planning for pastoral succession? Great question, Doug. Like I said, we can do it in as little as 6 months. That makes it really hard because that's almost like just a search. Okay. 2 to 3 years, what we tend to work through is, and we have a whole template that we go through. I think I mentioned you don't know what you don't know. There are so many issues that you need to talk about. How are you going to care for your pastor financially? How are you going to honor that pastor? What role are they going to have in the next senior pastor decision? Is it somebody that's internal? Is it somebody that you need us to help you go out and find? All of those kind of things are very important. Timeline is very important. And here's, I would say, the biggest mistake that churches make when it comes to succession, and this is where an outside firm, whether it's chemistry or somebody else, can help you, is that they just think it's going to be okay. We all love Jesus. We're all Christians here. We all love our church and we all have the best intentions here. What could go wrong? There's a lot of things that could go wrong. And it's the things that you don't know that are going to bite you, where we start with putting all of that stuff together and actually coming up with a written plan. We say a succession plan is not a succession plan if it's not on paper. So we'll help you work through all of those issues. We'll work with the pastor that's on his way out or her way out. We'll work with the new pastor or help you find that new pastor and identify. Sometimes that includes identifying what exactly you need for your next pastor. We'll help you put all of that kind of down in a timeline and in a written plan. And that's really, and work you through that as somebody that has done this before. Just a lot of issues there that you might not think about if you don't have maybe some outside voices speaking into it. Okay, great question. Let's see. Tim asks, how important are benefits, especially health insurance? Good question. This is an interesting question because I think that here's what I often say. I am convinced that there can be two churches sitting across the street from each other. They could be the same denomination, even they could be the same church size. And one of those churches, they could be almost identical. And one of those churches could pay their senior pastor $120,000, right? And the other church could pay their pastor $85,000. One church could offer health insurance, full benefits. One church could say, nope, we're going to put you on a health share plan, or we'll give you a $5,000 health insurance stipend that you can go out and find your own health insurance. Good luck trying to do that for $5,000. There are what we like to think of as some guardrails and some guidelines, but just looking at different churches pay different things and different churches give different benefits. How important is it? It's really important. We say that it's anywhere between $12,000 and $20,000 if your pastor or somebody you're hiring needs to go out and find their own. Now there are cheaper health shares and those kind of things, but that's a massive benefit. So you can't anywhere go in and hire somebody for $45,000 with no health insurance, because that takes, you take even take $10,000 off of there, that takes it down to 35, and it's almost unlivable. What we tell all of our churches is to be as generous as you can. Benefits are important, but they're not the only thing. Another thing that we say is, we like to say the saxophone and braces rule. Okay. If you need to pay well enough, anybody on your team, so that if their son comes home from school and says, hey, Dad, I want to play the saxophone, that you've got the opportunity to allow them to do that. If you need I was just seriously talking to somebody on a job interview within the past month, and they said, I went out in my garage and I wept for my daughter because she needs braces and we don't have the money to do that. So that was one of the reasons they were looking for another job. That's just sad, and it shouldn't happen. But be as generous as you can. And yeah, benefits are really important. There are a lot of benefits, and I can talk with you about this if you're more interested. There are a lot of benefits that you can give. Health insurance is one that is going to cost you some money, but there's other benefits that you can give that are very attractive to potential employees that really don't cost you a lot, that still look good. Let's see. Troy asks, what trends are you seeing in hiring youth and children's roles? Are those specialist roles still, or specialist roles still, or are they moving towards generalists? Great question, Troy. We are seeing, remember when I said that COVID kind of kicked a lot of people in the teeth? It kicked a lot of youth pastors in particular in the teeth. Youth pastors used to be some of our easiest hires because there were so many of them. They are now they're probably our hardest hire. Youth and kids are our hardest hire because we just lost so many of the really good youth pastors. They've just gone on to do something else. I will say that there has been some consolidation. We're seeing a trend of a lot of churches that are hiring a youth and children's role and calling it next gen or family role. And usually what that looks like is they're hiring somebody that can do either children's or youth primarily, and then supervise a key volunteer to do the other. So we have seen a little bit of consolidation there, but yeah, actually the generalist, that's a good way to think of it, is that the days of being the leader to 5th and 6th grade girls students is gone in a lot of churches. Let's see. Shane, this is a loaded question. I love it. And I don't know that I'm going to give you a really good answer, but I'm going to try. What's the best way, if any, to entice someone to come to relatively rural areas without being far away from, I just lost it, far away from competitive salaries for the same position? Okay. When you're at a smaller church or you're at a church that is rural, okay, it's harder. It's harder. I just got a resume yesterday from somebody, and I read the first line that he wrote to me, and I'm like, we need to find this guy a job. And I didn't even get to read the rest of his resume. I just sent it off to Holly, who does a lot of our sourcing. He said, we're rural people and we just want to be someplace, small town where we can raise our family and make a difference. And I'm like, yeah, we need people like that. Rural churches, there are people that work really well in smaller communities, but there are also a lot of people that don't want to be in smaller communities. So what that means for you in a smaller community is that a lot of times it just takes longer. We tell people from the start of a search until boots on the ground, that person is hired and in place, plan between 12 and 18 months, particularly if you're in a smaller town or a rural church, or it's a youth or a kids position. Those positions just take a little bit longer. Hopefully they go sooner, but you want to set up everything. You want to let your congregation and your church know that, hey, this is a need. We know it's a need, but it's going to take a while. We need to find the right person. There are those people out there. They're just harder to find. Very good. Let's see here. In what ways have you encouraged churches to look for diversity and leadership based on leading the church to mirror the community that they hosted in? I was just on a call earlier today with a church, and we always ask all of our churches that we're working with about the diversity issue. And he said, if you look up our community diversity on Google, we are a good 10 to 15 percentage points over that in our leadership, which is incredible. We try to have our churches mirror as much of their community as they can. If they're not, then they're probably missing something. On the other end of the spectrum, we'll have a church every once in a while that will come to us and they're like, we're about 120% white, but we want to hire a diverse candidate because we want to promote diversity. I get that, but you need to be really careful with that because that doesn't always communicate well to the candidate, and it doesn't always communicate well to your congregation. There's a lot of work that needs to be done there. Let's see. I know that wasn't probably a really refined answer, but it's what I got today. Matt asks, how does calling fit into the equation? It can seem that they're looking for a job rather than surrendering to a call. The calling is really interesting. I mentioned it earlier in the call. My generation, there was like a distinct, specific calling, at least for a lot, at least in my tribe. Hey, God called me here and then, and to do this, and this is what I have to do. I can't do anything but this. The younger you go, what I'm finding is that term calling has a totally different meaning. And again, for young people, it could be, I feel like God has a calling on my life. The calling is maybe a little bit older word. I don't know that they would even use that word, but I know that God wants to use me, and I know that God wants to use me in specific areas, but it could be in a church. It could be in a nonprofit. It could be working at Amazon and witnessing to my friends, right? You're going to, now that said, I still have my view of calling. They're still going to have their view of calling. I think there are some ways to figure out early on when you're talking to somebody. It's going to become fairly obvious. At least I think a lot of times it is fairly obvious whether they're called or whether they're looking for a job. We talked to a candidate in the past week where 2 minutes in, it was very obvious that the calling was about this big and the I need a job was about this big. Okay. Ask questions about calling. How did you decide to come into ministry? What are you passionate about? What would you do if you weren't doing this kind of work? Those kind of things, all get them to tell their story. And as they tell their story, they're going to share with you in one way or another what's beneath their story, whether they have a strong sense of calling, whether they're passionate. I hear quite often from churches that come to us and they say, we had to let our youth pastor go, for example, because the great person just didn't overly have a calling to youth and wasn't really passionate about youth. And part of that, honestly, is you got to ask those questions going in. There are some questions you can ask, and we can help you with those questions. Reach out to me. I can help you come up with some of those questions that will help you identify that passion and that calling early on. Let's see here. I got time for just a couple more. Paul says, sounds to me that the commitment today has changed. My concern is the consumerism type mentality. Are you seeing this? Yeah. That's not just in the church. It's not just in church work. That's just in our culture. And again, when you're interviewing candidates, if you're interviewing candidates, you need to find that out. It's getting better. A couple of years ago, right after coming out of the pandemic, we were having particularly younger people that were just making some audacious. I essentially want to work from home 4 days a week and unlimited vacation, those kind of things. And yeah, you need to ask the right questions to be able to make sure that you're getting really good workers. Let's see here. What about Winfred asks, how about baby boomers that want to go into pastoral ministries in their 70s? That's hard. It's hard, particularly if you're not involved in it. A lot of times we'll see if someone that's older that's involved in a church that can either come on as either a lay pastor or a bivocational pastor, that can work. A lot of churches are just they're going to look at the age, which they shouldn't. They're going to look at the age and have you done this before? And it's going to be really hard. So it's possible, but it's quite honestly, it's a little bit more difficult. About bivocational, Robin asked, are churches willing to have lower time expectations of their leaders? This is a mind shift change that churches need to be able to do. We were talking with a church not too long ago that wanted a full-time worship pastor. And we said, is it really a full-time role? Would you consider maybe a part-time or a bivocational? And they're like, no. And maybe that's the right choice for them, but it was just like, no, they couldn't see beyond what they'd always had or what they'd always done. You have to know that bivocational, there are a lot of pluses, but there are some minuses. And the minuses are that they're going to have split loyalties. They're going to be working probably a full-time or a part-time job and a part-time job at the church. So you just have to manage those expectations. You're not going to get a full-time person bivocationally. And if you're thinking like that, you're setting yourself up for really disaster. All right, one last question here. Do we have time? Yeah, I'll try and do it quickly. Peter asks, what trends are you seeing with churches creating roles that involve multiple departments for one position? Or is it the vast majority of positions still focused on one department? I would say, and again, this is going to be a larger church when you're talking about departments. I would say that there's not a lot of cross department if you're talking in a bigger church. but there might be some consolidation within that department. So if you've got an associate of this and an associate of this, they might be combined together. But we, in smaller churches, we are seeing, you don't have departments, but we are seeing, hey, and I don't think this is a bad way to think about it. Hey, we need a youth pastor, but we'd also like them to wear one other hat. Okay. And we're not sure what that other hat is. It could be this, or it could be maybe outreach, or it could be discipleship, or it could be communications. We're not sure. We have needs in all of those areas, but according to what that candidate brings to the table and what they're passionate about, we will find that role for them. So again, they're showing some flexibility there and looking at the individual and saying, okay, this is where you're gifted. This is where you're passionate about. This is what we can help you with. Okay. All right. If you've got other questions, you can email me. I'll give you my email address. It's podcast@chemistrystaffing.com. Okay. So very good. I appreciate so much everybody being here. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me, podcast@chemistrystaffing.com. Any questions at all, you can reach me, and also go to chemistrystaffing.com. Tons of resources there. We have a YouTube channel. We have a daily podcast that I said I was going to mention and I didn't. It's you can just go to chemistrystaffing.com/podcast, and it's a Healthy Church Staff podcast. We talk every weekday. It's about a 5 to 8 minute podcast where we talk about all things good about church staff. All right. Talk to you soon. Thanks so much for joining us.